So I think let's start the webinar. Everybody, a very warm welcome to all of you to LCR and CAE's joint webinar on the obtaining US permanent residency and green card through the EB-5 visa. Now we understand that not everybody may be familiar with the EB-5 visa, and that's why we are here. And today I'm joined by two leading speakers on the experts who are on this topic. One of them is Sherman Baldwin, CEO of LCR Capital Partners. And we also have Mitch Wexler, who's managing partner at one of the leading US immigration firms, Fragment. They're both joining us here today from the US. Let me begin with a small introduction about LCR, and then I would also want to spend 2 minutes talking about each of our speakers today. And then we will give the floor up to Sherman, who will take us a little bit through what the EB-5 visa is and how it addresses challenges faced by international students in the US. And then we'll have a question and answer session with Mitch, who's highly experienced in this program. And he will let us know what are the nuances of this program and how it helps students. Any questions that you may have, we can take at the end of the session. I hope all of this makes a lot of sense and gives a lot of insights to students and parents who are attending this. All right, so let's start. But let's come to LCR and what we do. We are actually a US-based private investment and advisory services firm. We specialize in immigrant investment programs, and one of the key areas that we work or help advise our clients in is the EB-5 investment program, which is basically an investment into the US economy that creates 10 jobs per investor, and in return, it provides green cards in one of the fastest possible ways that you can have today. So this is one of the easiest way you can achieve a permanent residency in the US. We also help advise clients in terms of other immigrant programs in Europe as well as the Caribbean islands. We also have a wealth management license in the US. We are a registered investment advisor, so we also help our clients to diversify their portfolio into US dollar assets. We also have a mortgage solutions business in the US where we help clients gain access to US credit. So that's a little bit about us. And for now, I want to stop here and welcome our speakers today. Welcome Sherman and welcome Mitch. Let me talk a little bit about Sherman. Sherman's the CEO of LCR Capital. He's been with us for around 3 years now. Prior to LCR, he used to be MD at Accenture, advising Fortune 500 companies. He started his career actually with McKinsey. He's actually had a very storied career across several Fortune 500 corporations, private equity firms, even the Pentagon. He's actually served in the US Navy as a carrier pilot. And in fact, there's also a book that he's written about his combat experience as a carrier pilot. What students will find very interesting is that he actually himself went to Yale. He has a master's degree from George Washington University and an MBA from Harvard. So he's pretty much been there and done it all. So you can also ask relevant questions to him. He's currently already serves as a lecturer on innovation and leadership at Yale. So welcome, Sherman.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have our other very eminent speaker today is Mitch Wexler, and he's kindly made time for us today. Mitch, welcome. Mitch is managing partners, one of the leading immigration firms in the world called Fragment. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about them. He is the managing partner for their Southern California offices, and his practice is very diverse. They advise a bunch of, and they advise clients across different countries, and especially even Indian students for obtaining various kinds of visas. It's not just restricted to EB-5. They work across student visas, L1, E2, etc. So they also advise large corporations for their employee visas. And Mitch himself is a thought leader in the space, and he's had years of experience in this space, and all your questions related to immigration can be best answered by him. He's a California State Bar certified specialist in immigration and nationality law, and he teaches a regular model on business and investment, including about EB-5 immigration law at the University of California, Irvine Law School. So that's a little bit about him. Mitch, welcome again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I think now I will leave the floor to Sherman. Sherman, if you could spend some time taking the audience through what LCR does and what challenges students typically face when they look for visa options in the US and how an EB-5 can address that.
Sure, happy to do that. Well, welcome everybody. Reedy, if we could go to the next page. So Shilpa did a nice, or keep going, Reedy. Shilpa did a nice job of describing LCR. I won't go into much more depth other than to say what we've built over the last few years is a platform of financial services and advisory services that is very relevant to international high net worth families. Families who are looking to be more global, to either gain a connection to the United States or to Europe, we have a variety of different services. So let's keep going on here. On the journey that next page, please, Reedy. On the journey that your family would take, it often starts with one of your children interested in education in the United States. We're seeing that at an earlier and earlier age. There are children that come and look at US boarding schools. Most, though, are looking at college. And you can see in this chart, there's been a 3x growth over the last 20 years in the number of international students. And about half of those students seek educational opportunities in the United States or in Western Europe. Next page, please. And as you'll also see, India is right up there, as one of the leaders. China is the leader in terms of the number of students, but India is right there, and these are both growing and continue to grow. COVID has had a bit of an impact, but everything that I've heard is that the trend is a continuing growing trend. Next slide, please. So there are some challenges, though, if your family and one of your children, a son or daughter, are looking to the U.S. To go to college and then perhaps to start their career. That's what many of our client families are looking at. If you apply internationally and as an international student, because of the high growth rate, because of the popularity, admission rates are extremely low. To some of the most competitive schools in the United States, admission rates are in the low single digits. If you're an international student applying in the international student category, they're far lower than that. So, admission rates is a challenge. Professional opportunities are very limited because it's a real challenge for companies to sponsor an international student without the right kind of visa. And we'll talk more about that with Mitch later. Tuition rates are very high. Americans often benefit from in-state tuition and other merit-based scholarships that is very challenging for international students to, frankly, impossible to get in-state tuition and very challenging to get merit-based scholarships. And then, visa delays, denials, long waits. I mean, these are all a frustration for international students. Next page, please, Reedy. Some of the benefits of the immigrant investor programs that we work with our families on are, if you're in an EB-5 and if you've applied for EB-5, you then are considered by colleges in the domestic pool. And so admission rates just statistically are higher. It enables you to succeed and interview and get internships because you're in a permanent resident category, and companies don't have to sponsor you, and so it's easier to gain employment. You're able to start your own business if you have a conditional green card, and there's no dependency, and you have just much more flexibility. You could go join a startup, you could join a big company. There's many different options if you have a green card. All right, next slide, please. Very quickly, the high-level parameters of the EB-5 program. It's a 30-year-old US federal program that has just recently been renewed for the next 5 years. So it's on solid footing. It's had a tumultuous last 18 to 24 months as many of you probably are aware of, but Congress just reauthorized it. The president signed it into law. And so for the next 5 years, it's on very stable footing. The time to get your conditional green card is typically 24 months, up to 36 months. There are two different avenues. There's called the direct program, which is probably less than 5% of the program. 95% of the program goes through pooled regional center funds. That's typically what LCR does, although we do direct as well. It covers the investor and their immediate family for children up to 21 years old at the time of filing. And there is a path to citizenship over time. It's focused on permanent residency, but citizenship is a possibility over time. The investment amount for what most options you'll read about is $800,000, and that's for projects in a targeted employment area. And the investment time horizon is typically 5 to 7 years. It depends on the project. It depends on the offering. Most deals are structured as 5-year mezzanine loans to the developer with 2 one-year extensions. That's the industry standard. So you need to be prepared to have your funds tied up for 5 to 7 years. So that's a high level view of the program. Okay, so let's turn to a little back and forth with Mitch. Mitch, maybe you could, just starting at a high level, most of the families on this call are working with our educational consulting friends. And so they're thinking of college in the US. And maybe you could talk a little bit about, the typical journey that a student would face going for an F1 and then OPT and H1B, and just some typical options that you've seen clients choose along the way. And when they come into a debate about, should I go H1B or EB-5? Just maybe talk a little bit about the typical sequence and journey that a family and a student should consider.
Okay, certainly happy to do that, Sherman. So typically that journey starts with an F1 visa application at one of the several U.S. consulates or embassies in India. And just about everyone on this particular call is going to be fairly familiar with how to go about applying for that F1 visa. It's not tricky at all. It's just you schedule an appointment, and once you get some paperwork from the school, you apply for the F1. Typically, very little drama in that piece of the puzzle. So once the F1 visa is issued to the student, they enter the US, and they're typically embarking on a 4-year undergraduate program. Now, it's during this 4 years where we're seeing a significant uptick in EB-5 interest, because once they're in the United States under certain circumstances, they can apply not only for or they could file not only the EB-5 petition itself, and that's done on a form called I-526E. They just came up with the letter E to accommodate some of the changes that were recently made back in March. So a foreign student in the US in F1 status in many situations can file the 526E along with an application package for adjustment of status, to adjust their status from the temporary or the non-immigrant F1 to the immigrant green card. While the 526, you could file it either concurrently at the same time or anytime thereafter, after the 526E is filed. Once the adjustment of status application package is filed, 2 things will happen in about 6 to 8 months now. We see that timeline coming down. They get a work permit, which is critical for a foreign student, and an international travel pass called advanced parole. So now the foreign student's either in his or her freshman, sophomore, junior, maybe even senior year, and they have a work permit and they can internationally travel. So combined, those 2 things are about 95% of the value of a green card. So once they graduate, they won't have to go into this kind of crazy H-1B lottery that was referenced a little earlier. So how that works is once a foreign student graduates, they get employment authorization for 1 or 3 years, depending on the curriculum that they just graduated. If it's a STEM program, science, technology, engineering, or math, they can get this OPT, optional practical training, which is the employment authorization status off of an F1 for 3 years. If it's not a STEM program, they get 1 year. Then they have to hope that that employer or another US employer is willing to file an H-1B lottery registration. And that just gets them into the lottery. That happens every March. The lottery selections get made towards the end of March, early April. If you're selected in the lottery, you file a complete H-1B application. If it gets approved, it's effective at the start of the upcoming fiscal year, which is October 1. So just to go back to Sherman's direct question, you could avoid all of that because statistically, the 65,000 H-1B visas that last year about 400,000 registrations were competing for. So it's nice for a foreign student to graduate with a work permit and a travel pass in his or her pocket. Sherman?
Thanks, Mitch. That's very helpful. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on the challenges of the H-1B program, because I know that many students are facing that decision. And you talked about the vagaries of the lottery. Are there other aspects of that program that make it a challenge?
Well, let's assume that they're really lucky and they get selected in the lottery and their employer's H-1B application gets approved. So another obstacle. So now they're in the United States, having graduated with an H-1B visa. It's good for 3 years. It's extendable for 3 more. Now we have to hope that that employer is willing to sponsor this former F1 student for the permanent green card. Not all US companies that sponsor for H's sponsor for green cards. If they do, assuming the student was born in India, which is going to be the case for most attendees on this particular webinar, there's a huge backlog in the 2 most common employment sponsored green card categories. They call it EB-2 and EB-3, the second employment-based category and the third employment-based category. Could be decades for an applicant born in India. Now, having filed, that renders one eligible for what we call post 6-year H extensions until they get to the green card finish line, which is going to be many, many years down the road. Right now, there's no backlog for India EB-5. There has been in the past, there will be again at some point in the future, but right now is a golden opportunity for Indian EB-5. There's no backlog. So that's why they can file adjustment of status if they're in the United States concurrently with the EB-5 application.
Yeah, that's a significant benefit of the new legislation. The new legislation that Congress passed, enables that. There's, Mitch, I think you maybe also talk about the in effect grandfathering provision, because the EB-5 program had so many ups and downs and short-term extensions. I think many families are nervous that, well, what if Congress doesn't renew it again, or what if I invest next year and in 5 years there's another gap? I think talking about that to reassure families that Congress took that into account would be very important.
Yeah, that was a huge win with the they call it the RIA, the new and improved version of EB-5. So all pending applicants are grandfathered in. So even if the program's not extended after 2027, there was a 5-year extension, everyone who's in the game can finish the game, basically. Because in the past few decades, there's been dozens of stops and starts, and everyone just has to be frozen until the program gets reauthorized again. Typically, it was kind of seamless. They'd reauthorize before the last version lapsed, but the last time the program went dark for about 10, 11 months or so. So that risk has been eliminated as a result of the new version.
That's great. I mean, Mitch, you've been in this business, a long time now, and developed great client relationships over that time. Maybe there's a couple anecdotes or stories of, how EB-5 has really changed, a person or clients or a family's life. And love to hear you, opine a little bit on some of the value that you hear from your clients of, why they're happy they went down this path.
Yeah, one of the reasons I love what I do is that, especially my EB-5 practice. So me and my team, we do all kinds of US immigration law, but I spend an inordinate percentage of my time on our EB-5 practice just because I enjoy it. It's a little different. It's complex, so it's very enjoyable for me. But it also, since it's kind of a one-on-one case type, I'm not dealing with a big company that might have dozens, hundreds, or thousands of foreign nationals. We get the opportunity to develop personal relationships. So I've been to clients' children's weddings in Mumbai with my daughter. I've been to family occasions and weddings in the U.S. Those that ended up settling near me in Southern California, we see each other. But I can recall particular clients of mine that I met probably 3 years ago in the lobby at the St. Regis in Bombay. That's usually where I stay. Two physicians, one was an eye surgeon, an ophthalmologist, and the other just a general practitioner. They needed to get over relatively quickly. They didn't have any contacts in the US to sponsor them. So EB-5 did the trick for them. And it just brings such joy to me when I see them flourishing. They're very active on LinkedIn. They're speaking at conferences. They're writing scholarly articles. They're really doing amazing things. And that's really what the immigration process really speaks to. And I was just glad to be a small part of their journey. And I just, as you could imagine, I've countless similar situations. So it's really gratifying for me.
That's great. One of I remember one of the we started bringing these words into our marketing material because a father, one of our clients, his daughter came to the U.S. for college and now is working at a prestigious consulting firm in the U.S. And I remember talking to the father, and he said, your business must be so satisfying because you're helping people achieve their dreams and achieve their full potential. And I like that thought, and I like the impact that it can have on people's lives. I mean, I always, as an investment professional, I always am cautious to describe to people that EB-5 is not a financial investment. The financial return that you can get a far better financial return putting your money elsewhere. But it's a strategic family decision. And if it's the right decision for your children or for you as a family, then the return on investment is incalculable because it's really life-changing for your family. And many of our clients are just thrilled with the opportunities and the new directions their careers can take, their education takes. So it is very gratifying to work in the industry.
I explained something similar to Sherman to clients
Sure.
too, that the ROI is not financial. It's what's the value of a green card to you, your kids, grandkids, great grandkids. So that's really how they have to kind of frame it in their mind, because sometimes they get caught up in the weeds, and can they get an extra 0.5% on the loan, and so the big picture they eventually get comfortable with.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I always talk about it with our clients. Is I mean, we are LCR's philosophy is being extremely disciplined and diligent investors that look for very conservative, very high credit groups, and as a result, the return to the investor actually is low because they're very low, as low risk as we can find type of investments for our investors. But it really is, the ROI is not financial because there are better places that you can put your money if you're simply looking for the financial return. But it is the value to generate. When we use the word multi-generational often in our business, and we manage people's wealth, we hope to work with their children and their grandchildren. And it's the value that access to the United States and residency and potentially citizenship over time in the United States can bring to a family.
There's often an inverse relationship. Some projects pay an inordinately high return, and oftentimes there's a reason for that.
That's basic finance. I mean, the higher the risk, the higher the return. So I mean, our philosophy is let's find very high quality developers, very low risk projects, and the resulting return is low. Mitch, maybe you can talk a little bit about any new benefits, maybe expand a little bit on the whole adjustment of status point, so that people can understand that about the new legislation and any other benefits that you're seeing your clients value about the way the new legislation was written. Certainly, I think the integrity measures are positive for investor, both transparency, visibility, and protections.
Yeah, it's known as concurrent filing. It's huge. It's really a game changer, but it's somewhat of a misnomer. It doesn't only speak to filing the adjustment of status concurrently with the 526E. It could be successively. So we're filing a lot of adjustment of status application packages for clients who we previously filed 526 petitions for over the last couple of years or so. But I think what's particularly relevant to attendees on this webinar is how adjustment of status relates to F1 foreign students. So there's a concept in US visa law known as dual intent. So someone in the United States on a particular type of non-immigrant visa, that visa may have this feature called dual intent built into it, or it may not. So dual intent allows, it's kind of a legal fiction, it allows a non-immigrant, so someone who's in the United States in H-1B status, for example, they're a non-immigrant. So it's temporary, they're not immigrating kind of in real time. But the H-1B visa program has this dual intent feature, which allows them at the same time to safely be applying for a green card while maintaining non-immigrant status. They can internationally travel and no issue. F1 does not have the dual intent feature. So we have to be a lot more careful as we navigate an F1 client through the green card process. So let's fast forward. F1 visa issued, US Embassy in Bombay, they enter the US. We file the 526. I want to make sure that we don't do anything that smells like a green card path for an F1 until they're in the US in most cases for 90 days. Because that's the line in the sand that the Immigration Service accepts for either circumstances to change or to conclude that they didn't have the intent to immigrate when they first entered as a non-immigrant F1. So after 90 days, safe to file the 526 concurrently with the adjustment of status. If the 526 is filed already and they've gone in and out, we don't launch the AOS, the adjustment of status, until they're here for at least 90 days or so. So just a little more managing and navigating for an F1/green card client.
Great, makes sense. Mitch, are there some current hot topics or things that haven't come up in the last 20 minutes that you're hearing from your clients that you think the audience might like to know about?
Nothing too significant. We always have unique source of funds. I think it's probably worth mentioning that concept anyway. Scenarios. So we have to document this as a critical component of the EB-5 filing, documentation of the lawful source of the funds, and more importantly, or as important, the path that those funds have taken from earnings all the way into wiring it into the project escrow account. So one of the changes that actually was a result of a court case, but it was mentioned in the recent iteration of the EB-5 rules, is that a loan no longer has to be collateralized. Not huge. If you take an asset to the bank and you have equity in real estate and you take out a loan against that equity, the bank's gonna, as a practical matter, gonna require collateral. But if you just get a loan from an uncle, a neighbor, a relative, usually it's collateralized, but it doesn't have to be anymore. So typical components of a source of funds scenario, as we call it, is just either an accumulation of earned income over a number of years, and or a loan, and or a gift. So we have to, on a case-by-case basis, we strategize to see who the best primary applicant for the EB-5 is. If there's more than one child, it's usually going to be one of the parents, because that will include all under 21 age children. If a common use case is one child, he or she's already in the United States, 21 years old already, so too old to be included in a family package. So in that situation, that child will be the sole applicant. So source of funds always a topic. We need to keep an eye on the LRS currency limitations. So as many on this call would know, if you're residing in India, not out of India, being a non-resident, the limitation is $250,000 per person per year is what you can take out of the country. So many times we have to aggregate that allotment from a number of family members. If the applicant is residing out of India, we have many Indian clients in Dubai and Singapore. They're typically not declared to be non-residents, and there's no limitation on currency. So every case is kind of unique, and these are just, you know, some of the moving parts on typical cases.
Great. Shilpa, should we open it up to the audience for questions?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a few questions that have already started coming in. I'll go ahead and ask. I think this one's for Mitch. Mitch, there's somebody in the audience who's asked what process is to actually get the H1 lottery. Is there some way people can, you know, make it in the round?
No, it's a pure lottery. If the applicant has an advanced U.S. degree, so a master's degree from a U.S. institution, not from ITT or some other non-U.S. institution, their odds are just a little bit better, because they get to compete for an additional 20,000. So a total of 85,000 they're drawing from, as opposed to 65,000. But if it's just a typical Indian F1 foreign student graduating with an undergrad degree in engineering, computer science, it's pure lottery.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Let me actually expand a bit on that. So there's a prohibition on multiple applications from the same entity, from the same employer. Even if they're separate but affiliated, they'll throw both or all three or all four of them out if they detect that. But occasionally a single F1 individual might get, especially in this hot job market, that might get job offers from more than one US employer, totally unrelated US employers. So if more than one are willing to file lottery registrations, they can too. So that statistically will increase the odds for that student.
I see. Interesting. The other question that is being asked is about OPT and how, if there are any challenges, let's assume, I believe there are two types of OPTs. One is when you have a STEM, and if you don't have a STEM course, they're different. Have you, in your experience, seen challenges faced by students in that process?
Not too much. Each school has what they call a DSO, a designated school official, whose sole job it is to look after F1 students. So they're pretty knowledgeable in the OPT application process, the paperwork that's needed. There's a system called SEVIS that they need to go into. So typically it's pretty uneventful when a foreign national graduates with an undergrad degree. They'll get the 1 year OPT, and if it's a STEM degree, they could then apply for a 2-year extension for a total of 3. But
okay,
not too many wrinkles in that process.
Okay, got it. Thank you. The next question is for you, Sherman. You did mention that this is an investment that goes in, but I think what people want to know is if this money comes back, and how much time does it usually take?
Yes, I mean, it absolutely is intended to come back. It typically takes 5 to 7 years. The typical deal structure that we employ is an industry standard, which is a 5-year mezzanine loan to a developer doing the project. And the developer typically has 2 1-year extension options that have to be mutually agreed to by the developer and by LCR. So, we look for developers with long track records of using EB-5 capital, because they know the value of it and they appreciate it and they respect the EB-5 investor. And because they've used EB-5 capital before, and because they've made a strategic decision in their business model to use EB-5 going forward, I think that gives EB-5 investors, in our network, a lot of comfort, because they've seen these developers repay the capital in the past, and they know they want to do it to keep a good track record for EB-5 investors in the future. So you typically will get a nominal return of 25 to 50 basis points per year during the 5 to 7 year term. You get your conditional green card between 2 to 3 years, and then you get a permanent green card at about the 5-year point, and you get your capital back between years 5 and 7.
Shilpa, I think
Thanks.
this is a good point to talk about the sustainment period, because it's related to what Sherman just said, but it's also on my side of the equation.
Sure.
So there's a concept known as the sustainment period, which is the period of time that the investment has to be sustained. So an applicant / investor can't prematurely exit the investment from an immigration perspective, because they'll lose the green card opportunity. So that sustainment period goes through the 526 pendency, the adjustment of status pendency, until the adjustment of status is approved or the visa is issued at the consulate and they enter the US. So when that 2-year conditional green card period starts, all the way to the end of that 2-year conditional green card period, when the 829 petition is filed, which seeks to convert it from the conditional to the unconditional. So once that's filed, after that 2-year conditional green card period, then from my perspective, I'll allow my client to get their money back. But I always say, talk to the project, talk to the regional center, because you still may have an ongoing obligation with them. It's never perfectly timed, but it's usually similarly timed.
Yeah.
Right, that's right. Thanks, Mitch, for that. I think in the interest of time, there are 2 more questions we'd like to take, and then we'll wrap up. Another one for you, Sherman. Can you provide some examples of the kind of investments that EB-5 investors usually make? Like what are they investing in?
Sure. I'll talk about our last few projects. So we did a project in Miami, Florida, that was a 4 Seasons hotel. It was called the Surf Club. We raised $100 million in EB-5 capital from 200 different investors when the investment amount was $500,000. And we're on the verge of, returning some capital to some of those investors. So that's very exciting. Our next project was in Dallas, Texas. It was a similar luxury hotel with luxury residences next to it, called the Hall Arts Hotel and Residences, with a world-class developer called the Hall Group, one of the United States' largest private development companies. And then another project that we're working on is in Miami. It's with the Royal Palm Companies. It's called Legacy. It's another luxury hotel and residences with an adjoining health and wellness center. So it's a very exciting project in Miami. A 4th project is the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, which I appreciate that the American football is not well known in India, but it's a very big thing in the United States, and the NFL is one of the strongest brands in the United States. So we're very proud and excited to be part of that project. So I'd say the word that we use at LCR is signature, meaning we want to be involved with special signature iconic projects that have strong developer, high credit, and strong brands associated with them. Like the 4 Seasons is another example. So
thanks, Sherman. I just want to add there, typically the kind of projects that we have, they are structured as debt instruments. So you are actually lending. It becomes a little bit more safe in that case. The other thing that the reason why we prefer these iconic real estate projects, for example, is because a key element of you getting your green card is actually job creation in the US. These projects are huge projects. They create a lot of jobs, and for example, we have 200 investors. we only need 10 jobs per investor. So typically we need 2,000 investors. These projects will create at least 4,000 jobs, for example. So you have a very good cushion, sometimes twice, thrice as much as you need. And we feel very comfortable because frankly, that's the only reason why you might get rejected for your green card. So we like to be on the, in the safe spot, have a lot of cushion. That's why we go for these kind of big sort of blue chip projects in the US. There's another last question that I will take, and I think I'll answer this, Sherman, because it's a little bit related to the Indian regulations. So for someone who does not have 8,000 in hand, is there a way LCR can help in making investments that can use the capital that's in hand and eventually help in getting the investment required for EB-5? That's a very, very interesting question. And yes, we do have a solution for it, but there are certain challenges, and I will explain why. The US CIS actually is okay if you take loan for some amount of this, as long as you can show the documentation, and Mitch can tell you what that entails. But in India, it is a challenge if you borrow locally, that is in Indian rupees, and send it abroad in US dollars. It's not allowed under the FEMA regulations. If you're an NRI or you have relatives abroad and they can raise this money for you outside, and an NRI can raise it for you, then you can do this in a compliant way. Otherwise, it's a challenge if it's from India. So I think that's what I would say. But if you're located anywhere outside of India, definitely it can be done. So I think with this, we're out of time actually. Thank you so much for attending this. And Sherman and Mitch, thanks a lot again for your time. I know it's a little bit early for you, but I hope everybody got some good insights here. Please feel free to reach out to us. If anybody needs to get connected to Mitch, we're happy to connect you. It doesn't have to be on EB-5, it can be about F1 or OPT or anything else that you need advice on. The Fragment team can help. And we are here if you want to discuss EB-5, maybe the Portugal Golden Visa, or even wealth management solutions in the US. So please feel free to reach out. My details are available with the CAE team. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure. Thank you.